following the conclusion of a highly anticipated phone call that took place earlier today between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. The White House announced that the two leaders agreed that the first step toward peace would be a limited ceasefire. And the Kremlin announced that Putin has ordered a temporary halt to strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Furthermore, the White House said that negotiations for a full ceasefire and permanent peace will begin immediately in the Middle East. So, it's off to a good start, it seems. What else do we know about the phone call that took place today? And what can we draw from it? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Pat Harrigan. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, as well as the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And just for you all to know, he is a combat decorated Green Beret. He led operations in Afghanistan as a member of the U.S. Army Special Forces, and now he represents the 10th Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman Harrigan, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you.
Hey, Jody. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate being here.
Well, it is our honor, and thank you for taking time. I know you've got a lot of plates spinning in your world right now, so we appreciate you coming on with us. So let's go to the talk between Putin and Trump today. What were some other key takeaways from the phone call that maybe we need to know about?
You know, look, I think very clearly we're making progress towards bringing this conflict to a conclusion. I think President Trump has spearheaded this effort. You've seen his leadership step up when the rest of the world has kind of pushed off the ideas that President Trump is bringing forward to end this conflict. And I think with agreeing to a limited and temporary ceasefire, this is a first step in the right direction towards getting to a permanent peace that President Trump has talked about. I think we all know that this war has gone on for more than 3 years. It has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. And at the end of the day, it is not in the United States of America's key strategic interests in order to continue this war where we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars and not actually achieving our strategic interests. There's not an end state that's achievable. There's not one that is in sight. And I think President Trump is right to bring this war to a drawdown. And I think today was a very good first step in that direction.
Yeah, it really seems that way. And just for clarity's sake, of course, we all know that Ukraine, Zelensky, the president there, tried to have a meeting here recently. But just for clarity's sake, the limited ceasefire that Trump and Putin have agreed to now is a first step, obviously, towards peace, as you mentioned. But we're not talking about necessarily the same ceasefire agreement that was discussed with Ukraine, are we?
Right. I think you've got the United States and President Trump and his envoy are playing the role of mediator in this conflict. And I think some of the things that are worth noting that were discussed today, we're talking about broad economic agreements. When we want to talk about what's in our strategic interests in Ukraine, look, it's very simple. It is not aligned with Ukraine's strategic interests. Ukraine wants Russia expelled from its borders immediately. That has been its strategic interest from day one of this conflict. Our strategic interest has always been, from the outset of this conflict, the bifurcation of the relationship between Russia and China, preventing Russia from working with China to mass military power against our interests around the world. The very best way that we can accomplish that is not endless conflict that spends hundreds of billions of American taxpayer dollars to a conflict we can't win because we're upside down on the economics of that conflict. We're shooting $1 million missiles at $50,000 drones. That's a great way to bleed this country to death, much like Ronald Reagan bled the Soviet Union to death. And so if we can focus on an economic relationship with Russia, bifurcating that relationship and dependency it has with China, that is in the United States of America's key strategic interests.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you bring up there. Okay, so as we have it at this point, as it currently stands, Russia appears to have made this move toward a limited ceasefire, but Ukraine also is going to have to make a move at some point. Do we have any understanding yet as to the reaction or any news from the Ukrainian side to this point?
I think there has been a broad understanding that this war needs to come to closure. I don't think that President Zelensky is, too favorable to the way that this has gone on. But I think that President Trump has been very clear. The American people are exhausted in their endless and significant support that they have made that is not achieving the strategic interests of the United States. And so I think that there's going to be some pushback to this process. I think that's to be expected. But at the end of the day, if we want to maintain a free world, the best way that we can do that is end this conflict, separate the forces that are truly a threat to us and our future as freedom-loving Americans and folks that love freedom around the world. We cannot go to anyone's rescue if we are broke. We've got to understand that. We've got to pick our battles very, very wisely. And drawing this fight to a close is our number one strategic interest right now as we reset for future strategic interests that are much more pressing to us than this.
So how would you, just broadly speaking, what's your assessment of how President Trump has approached this Russian-Ukraine war?
Look, I don't want to get ahead of the president on policy. That is not my job. What I will tell you is I think he's taken a very sober perspective to what I talked about very briefly earlier, which is we're losing the economics of this conflict. You have to understand, our military is built for shock and awe and to provide overwhelming military capability in a very short period of time that overwhelms our enemies. If our fights go beyond 5, 6, 7, 8 days, we're going to lose the economics of that conflict. And by extension, we're going to lose the conflict because we're so upside down on really high cost, exquisite capabilities that we are really, really good at. But we are not good at long sustained conflict, particularly that features unconventional or irregular warfare, where our enemies are producing the low cost solutions to our high cost problems. President Trump understands this. And until we flip the equation on the economics within our defense industrial base and actually can create the low cost solutions to our enemy's high cost problems, we're going to continue to lose any type of long-term conflict. And so we actually need to step back. We need to refit our defense industrial base, and we need to do some things very differently. That's what I'm very focused on the House Armed Services Committee, is making sure that not only do we maintain that edge on the exquisite, high-tech, high-cost platforms that can allow us to deliver decisive blows against our adversaries, protecting the American people and American interests, but can also sustain conflict over the long term and win a protracted war, which we have not been able to do since World War II. We've got to fix that. That's why we need to push pause on the Ukrainian conflict and restart our defense industrial base and our allies' defense industrial bases for China.
Excellent comments there, Congressman Pat Harrigan of North Carolina. I'm so glad that you are on the Armed Services Committee. Your expertise and your experience alone is of extreme value and importance to that committee, and we appreciate all that you're doing there. Listen, if you can hang on after the break, I've got some more questions I want to run your way. We've got so much to cover, and appreciate if you can hang on for a few more minutes.
I'd be happy to do it, Jody.
Congressman Harrigan, thanks for staying with us. Really appreciate it.
Sure, Jody. Absolutely.
All right, let me get your thoughts as we kind of shift gears over towards the Middle East. The 2-month-long ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came to an abrupt end. Give me your thoughts on that.
Look, I think President Benjamin Netanyahu laid it out. Every effort by Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump to end this conflict has been, just not agreed to by Hamas. They systematically have killed both American and Israeli hostages. They have continued to plan large-scale attacks against Israeli sovereignty and the Israeli people. And now President Netanyahu has decided to move forward with conflict. And I think this is an unfortunate development, but one that Israel is absolutely within their right to take this action. And so I think we've got to keep in mind, we're dealing with terrorists. We're dealing with people that believe that it is pleasing to God to kill folks who are non-Muslims and to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. That is not something that we stand for out here in the West, despite all the voices coming from our crazy woke leftist universities and the Democratic side, the extreme left side of the Democratic Party. We support Israel. I hope that this conflict can come to a close here very soon because, look, the world's on fire. And right now, it is not in our best interest to tune up the heat. We've got to turn the heat down, but we've got to have the proper conditions set for that to happen. President Benjamin Netanyahu is taking the lead on making sure that that happens for the nation of Israel.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the left. I mean, there's no question there's a lot of criticism against Israel coming from those who overall have not been supportive of the Jewish state. And many in those camps obviously believe the Hamas propaganda. And they believe Israel's wartime crimes, so to speak, that they're guilty of that type of thing. As someone who knows firsthand about war and warfare, what would you say to those critics?
Hamas has earned this. They've earned it. They earned it on October 7th. They earned it when they mercilessly killed these Israeli hostages. They earned it when they paraded the Bibas family through the streets of Gaza, and they've earned it with their systemic decisions to choose terror and murder instead of acting like a civilized society. They've given Israel absolutely no choice, and it's unfortunate, but in this world, people do make choices, and they have to live with those consequences.
Well, and now add to that, it's a great statement because they have earned it. But now you have coming on board with this, the Yemen-based Houthi terror group targeting Israel as well and kind of getting in a conflict with the United States. It's a pretty bold move from them, a terrorist group that the Trump administration has set its sight on, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly right. I think a lot of people, with everything else that President Trump has inherited with this world on fire from President Biden, the inaction against the Houthis has been something that I think is truly a strategic error by the Biden administration. You have a terrorist organization, a set of thugs, pirates, really, that are impacting 75% of the U.S. ships that move through the Red Sea. That is totally intolerable to our interests. President Biden did very little. President Trump has said, you know what? We're going to take decisive action against these folks. They are not going to push the United States of America and our key strategic interests around. And not only are we going to hold the Houthis accountable, we are also going to hold Iran accountable, who's actually backing these rogue third-party terrorist nation states. And I think President Trump is doing exactly what he should be doing. And those are serving the best interests of the American people, not just at home, but very clearly abroad.
Two more really quick questions for you. We've only got literally 2 minutes. So, but just overall 30,000-foot perspectives. We dealt with this a little bit on the program yesterday, but the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. Real quickly, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I actually made a post earlier today. I said, you know, President Biden, he paid $6 billion to Iran to free 5 American hostages, and President Trump has spent $6 million to send 300 Tren de Aragua members back to El Salvador. And President Biden put a price on Americans' heads. President Trump is now putting a price on terrorists and gang members and violent criminals' heads. I like the new math. And look, we talk about all these different circumstances where across the world's burning. And as I have always said, when America fails to lead, the world burns. And that's exactly what we found during President Biden's administration. When that passed to President Trump, we have to understand that undoing all of this is a monumental challenge. I actually don't think at any time in our nation's history, certainly within the generations that are alive today, that we have faced the number of threats with the severity that each one comes with stacked on top of one another all at the same time. And so to take the temperature down on all of this is not going to be something that's easy. It's not going to be quick, but President Trump is being decisive about it. He's keeping the big picture in mind, and we are notching incremental wins. The purchase by BlackRock of the property along the Panama Canal was absolutely decisive, and that was due to President Trump's leadership. That is something that China cannot undo, and they actually took the last couple of days they've spent just throwing the name of Hutchinson, the company that sold the property to the United States. They have been throwing that CEO's name through the mud, calling him a traitor to China. We are winning incrementally, and I want the American people to know that.
Thank you so much, Pat Harrigan of North Carolina. Great to talk with you. Appreciate so much you coming on and staying on during the break, after the break with us. God bless you.